One thing that I haven't noticed, at least, or found on BookTube, is a lot of discussion of short fiction. People talk about these anthologies, they talk about collections, but they don't get into the details of the collections themselves. Hi, I'm Josh, and welcome to Josh's Bookish Voyage. In this video, I'm going to be doing my first ever short fiction review. So I got this idea first from Books and Lala's 3 thriller mini review series that she does. Where every time she reads 3 thrillers, she does a set of 3 reviews. I like this idea because I have some really giant sets of anthologies that I keep wanting to get to, but I haven't been doing or haven't been reading because they are so long and they don't really fit into the system I have of setting a TBR for a month and then planning on reading it all. First of all, because they're so long, it'd be a hassle to get through all of it in a month, but also because I don't necessarily want to get through all of it. There's so many different types of stories in a lot of these anthologies that I want the opportunity to take my time. But I need to think of a way of fitting it into my YouTube channel that works for me, basically, because a lot of my reading basically revolves around how I'm YouTubing or what I plan on YouTubing. That doesn't necessarily I don't read what I want to read, rather it's I have a system of YouTubing that allows me to talk about things that I'm reading. In order to do that, I need to think of a new way to talk about things like these giant anthologies that I won't necessarily read in a month. So I think this is an awesome opportunity where basically I do this sort of series where I will choose 4 or so short fiction stories that I have read and talk about them. It's short fiction, therefore it's harder to talk about it in a way that doesn't just generalize every single story in a collection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down into just a brief rundown of my thoughts and the themes or the ideas being explored in the short story, and then my rating. And then at the end, I'll give you a rundown of what actually happened so we can explore the themes or the implications a bit further. Of course, you don't have to watch the spoiler section, especially if you intend to read these stories, but the goal here is just to get you interested in some of these authors, hopefully in the collections, and most importantly, give me an outlet to talk about this short fiction that I love reading, which is why I'm really excited to be doing this series on these short stories. The idea is in each video I'll focus on a specific collection, and like for this one, the Time Travelers Almanac by Anne and Jeff Vandermeer. It's a series of time travel it's an anthology of time travel stories. You might know Jeff Vandermeer from Annihilation, the movie with Natalie Portman, and of course the really weird Southern Reach trilogy series. He and his wife do a lot of fantastic, weird, and fantasy sci-fi anthologies. When I started reading this one last year, I started doing a review on it on my blog. Never actually got around to finishing it rather. This has 72 stories. If I review 4 stories per video, you might expect 18 parts to this collection, which is perfectly fine. You don't have to watch all of them. I'm going to try and go in order, or some type of order in here. In this anthology, we have 4 parts: experiments, reactionaries, evolutionaries, mazes and traps, and communiques. And the idea is each section holds a specific type of time travel story, because at least from this one, it's a bunch of type of time travel you can have. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be reviewing a story from each section, hopefully each time, maybe once, twice a month. In this one, I'm doing the first story of each collection. You can find the details of each of the stories below. I'll give you the page number for this collection, and I will try and tell you where it was originally published in case you don't want to read the entire collection. Maybe you can find it elsewhere. The first story is by Richard Matheson. It is called Death Ship, and it is about this crew of just a few people on this ship on the spaceship whose job is to find life, alien life, elsewhere outside of Earth. And then they're supposed to retrieve a sample and bring it back to Earth. But in doing so, they visit this planet that seems to have this sign of a ship. They go and investigate. It looks like one of their ships from their companies. They investigate more closely, and what they see inside the ship are themselves on the floor, dead. The ship has crashed. They're trying to figure out what the hell's going on. They're confused. They're trying to figure out what type of situation is going on here. This is a time travel book, so obviously we're supposed to wonder, is this a time travel scenario? And seemingly they begin to wonder the same thing. Is this a trick? Is it an illusion? Is it an alternate version of themselves? Is it a future version of themselves? And they start to ask themselves, what the hell is going on? ultimately they have to decide how they're going to live their life. Now, I don't have to get any further into the story here to explore the really cool side of it here. This idea of, is our future set in stone? Can we change it? I'm of the opinion that the universe is a closed loop, meaning even if we could time travel, you can't change the past. You're probably part of the reason it happened. So in this scenario, if we were in this ship together, if that was truly our future selves, I would assume we were screwed, that we had no hope. Because no matter what we do, it's probably going to lead to that happening. Even if that happening, us seeing it, is the reason we do what we do. It's a little ridiculous, but it's still a lot of fun to think about. Now, suppose it's not. Suppose it's a different universe. Suppose you can change the past. Who knows? Then everything's open. The question is, what do you do in the situation? It's just so much fun imagining it, and it's a lot of fun watching it play out. I thought he did a fantastic job. Some really cool tricks. Highly recommend. It was a great first story. Again, I'll link the story below. I think I gave it 5 out of 5. I actually read this story. I've read some of the stories in this collection before, like I started it last year, and I'm rereading it again for this series, and this is the third time I've read it, because I think I read it twice last time without realizing I'd already read it, and I love it. I just love it. 5 out of 5. It's a great story. And the next one is The Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury. Now, if you don't know, I can't sit up straight for some reason. Ray Bradbury is a classic. He does a bunch of different stuff, but in this one, it is known as, I'm a little hesitant to say it, but it's known as the book. It's a story that began this idea of butterfly effect. So that gives you an idea of where the story is going, but I still thought it was a really good story, even knowing that going in, because they do talk about that as an introduction to the story. The idea is you have this company who knows how to time travel, and naturally, capitalism demands that rich people can pay them to use that, and they can use it to go back in time and hunt. In this situation, they want to hunt game. They want to hunt dinosaurs. And it's this really cool situation. It's clearly set up to avoid ripples, butterfly effects, because they have this very orchestrated system set up to avoid any type of interaction with the past outside of trying to hunt the game. Now, obviously, it seems impossible to be able to do that without having some effect. But I think that Ray Bradbury does a really interesting and decent job at making it believable that they might have this type of system set up, where they might convince themselves they're not actually changing anything, assuming they follow certain rules. Then things play out. But this is one of those situations, like I said, I have to go into some details of the story so we can explore the themes. Anyways, this one I enjoyed a lot. I think I gave it 5 out of 5 as well. It's a classic. It's so well done, and it's just really interesting. More on this one in the spoiler section. Next one is The Clock That Turns Backwards by Edward Page Mitchell. This is my least favorite. It's about these two cousins who see their aunt come in or go out into or come out of a big clock of hers, and she looks older than she was before. Editing Josh here. I'm having serious problems with my audio, so I need to reiterate what I was saying. So we have this aunt who has this clock. She goes into it one night, and then she comes out, and she looks older to these two cousins. She eventually dies, gives it to them, and then they begin to investigate it, and they go off and to do some excellent adventures. It reminded me of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, not at all from the tone, to be clear, just from the idea they have these two kids who have this clock or box type thing to travel through. I didn't much care for it. I think that part of it was that, one, it was compared to H.G. Wells's Time Machine as one of the oldest time travel stories, but also because it's a war fiction narrative and it's really not something I'm interested in, reenactments of war, so I just didn't like it. The next story is What If by Isaac Asimov. And in this story, we have this couple who come across this weirdo on the train who supposedly can tell them, or show them rather, the world, had the two of them not met, had things gone slightly different in their life on the day they had met, or anything other than that. This story explores the concept of fate and how much stuff could change with even just with only the slightest altering to history as we know it. Would things go exactly as we had expected them? Or would things have changed? Would big life decisions, big life paths have been completely diverted? I thought this was a really fun story. This is a cool concept. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I don't want to go any more into that without sort of spoiling the story. More in the spoilers, which, by the way, we're there. I figure, why don't I go backwards? Since we're doing a time travel one, I'll start with the last one. Let's again, What If by Isaac Asimov. So the wife asks, what if we hadn't met? What if something happened and he met my friend instead? And so he marries the friend. And she gets mad at him. He's like, honey, first off, this is a scam. Second off, even if it wasn't, like, you can't blame me for some other version of myself doing something else. And they keep progresses. They're like, okay, we see ourselves a year later. Then all the way to now. And eventually they see that each other would get, 5 years later, they'd separate. He'd separate from his old wife and they get married. And those other versions of themselves would want to be with him. Or think to themselves how they seem to be missing each other. Like, this was meant to be. Like, what they had wasn't real. Almost as if it is fated. So that part I didn't love. I like the idea of it being more chaotic. It had a bit of a happier ending than I would have thought. The ending also seemed to suggest there might have been some overlay between the two scenarios, like one world leading into the other, but it wasn't clear enough for me to actually believe that's actually what happened, so I'm assuming that's not what happened. And in the end, I think he could have went with a much darker ending that would have been more satisfying. A really well thought out story. And the one before that, The Clock That Turns Backwards by Edward Page Mitchell. These two teens or cousins go back in time. Turns out they're a part of history. Their aunt or their history teacher was a part of history. And it's this conversation of, does the past influence the future? Are the two intertwined? Personally, this didn't work for me. I did not care for the Victorian type feel or the 1800 feel. I didn't like the war setting. I just didn't much care. It's a cool idea, but it just doesn't work for me. And then before that, The Sound of Thunder by Ray Bradbury. So good. So they're there. They have this situation where they're all wearing hazmat suits. Or they're wearing these suits to keep them protected. They only hunt dinosaurs that were set to die anyways. So they go to the scenario right where they're about to die, and then they allow the people to shoot them dead. And such that what happens is they technically die by being hunted. And then everything that plays out after they die is what would have happened anyways when they were fated to die. Fated to die, that is to say. Doesn't stop the hunter there from panicking for his life, so he runs off the path, steps in the soil, steps on a butterfly. He almost gets left behind by the tour guide, who is pissed. He's like, they might destroy the company, you might destroy the world, blah 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 blah. And you go into the future, everything seems to be fine, except the air. Something's wrong with the air. It's just slightly different. There's something about the air that's different. Also, the sign that was there when they came in, it's spelled differently. The dialect is different. The English language is still there, but the spelling and the dialect has changed just slightly. And then lastly, the president who just got elected is a fascist, and the presidency changed basically, which I think it's amazing that just, I don't know, that one tiny switch. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's a bit of a stretch, of course, but it's also it's pretty damn creative to be like the first of its kind studying or exploring this idea of the butterfly effect. I also just really loved this idea of thinking about the effect of one species or one specimen on the course of evolution. It's a really interesting idea when we think about how significant is any one animal to the evolution of a species, from one species to another. How important is the set of mutations existing in that one butterfly to the butterflies that might have come after, and so on and so forth. I think it does sound like a stretch, but at the same time, you never really know. This such an intricate path of evolution over those millions of years. It's curious to wonder what would have happened. I think it'd be really cool to see someone try and map out that evolutionary path there and try and justify his decision. And if not, maybe rewrite the story in a way that's more believable. I just think it's just so cool. I love this idea of thinking about alternative evolutions and the different paths life could take. And then finally, the first story, Death Ship by Richard Matheson. Story I read 3 times. They go off into space. They decide to lift off. They are panicking. They think they're going to crash, but they don't. They're fine. They're in space, and then they start to fly away. And that is when the captain realizes this is a scam. Clearly, whoever is on that planet, there is life on the planet, and they're trying to trick us so that we don't invade and take over. And we're not doing that. I'm not going to back off from my mission, and I'm going to stick to my mission. So he does that, and he becomes sort of fixated on this idea as he returns, to the dismay of his colleagues, to the other people on the ship. In doing so, the ship starts to fall apart on descent. things seem to be panicking. And then they land. They land, everything seems to be okay. That is until it's a flash, or rather a fading of sorts, and we begin to see everything from the perspective of the dying human. The question here is, what happened? Was this all an illusion, a delusion in the mind of one of them dying? Did they just imagine this all happening in their dying moments? Or did it actually happen? Did they die? Did they land properly and then have to join back in with the body of those that died? If I had to guess, I would say that they died the first time go around, and then he imagined the rest of it. Maybe not. Maybe there's some type of portal or something going on there that sort of just initiated this sequence of events. Well, one thing caused another. Because if it is time travel, then you have this situation where they only crashed because he went back for what he took to be evidence of life, which was themselves. But then again, why were they there in the first place, if not for the evidence of themselves on the surface? I don't know. It was a lot of fun, though. I love this time travel story. I love this collection. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts on these stories. If you're interested in watching them, make sure you like and subscribe. Remember to stay safe and have a great day. Bye.